Yeah, we gotta hang out.
Are live. We are live. It's been a long time. It's been a long, long time. My computer won't let me be great, but tonight, I guess it was the night. What do you say? I'm here with Sister Mayana. All praise be to the Most High. I'm hearing the echo. We're going to have a little bit of a conversation. I'm going to let Sister Mayana, should I let Sister Mayana interview the conversation or introduce it? What do you think, Sister Mayana? I got an echo on my side. I think the echo is on my side. Yep, the echo is on my side. Thank you for that. We're introducing the conversation. We have to give the whole backstory. Mayana, would you like to give the backstory on why we are under the palm in the night season having this discussion?
having a peer review for you, episode 1. Well, it came to my attention in the night season that there was a bit of a uproar, a bit of a discussion happening around 3 a.m. at the absurd hour of blessings, sister blessings, at the absurd hour of 3 a.m. This morning, where Brother Ron Shields, unable to sleep, wanted to discuss the conversation we had regarding the libations he is reintroducing to the people, or the practice of libations that he's reintroducing to the people. As some of you may know, 2 weeks ago, Amuna and I held separate conversations inviting him to have a dialogue. In fact, he did come to the first dialogue on the relationship challenge, and then later was unavailable for the second conversation on under the palm. But in both instances, he was aware and invited to a conversation to explore his thinking and reasoning regarding the assertion that we may want to revisit the ritual of libation. Interestingly enough, the 3 a.m. revisit that he did, we were not notified. I found out about it about an hour or so, or 2 hours after the broadcast had finished, and there was quite a lively conversation in the chat and the like. And so the first part of the discussion was about us for maybe the first 50 minutes, you would say, Amona?
And thereabouts, I would say it was about a review of the review. It was about us and his perception of how we interface. So again, Brother Divine Process, you're probably going to see this. I hope you do. You already know how it is. Feel free to reach out. We're having a discussion, not in the usual manner. I got to put the little disclaimer in there. Why are we pressing this issue? We're going to get to why we're pressing this issue a little later on, but I'll give it back to Sister Mayana at this
We
point.
want to make it known that before we went live, we tagged him in this discussion. So it's not something, it's a courtesy that we always extend when we're going to have a conversation that involves someone who is the originator of the thought. We never discuss the person, and that person, especially if we have access to the person. So we have tagged him. He is aware. We also tag those that are close to him so that we could further ensure that the message gets to him. It's 10:44 here in Brooklyn. So I believe he's still on the East Coast. So I guess if he can talk about us at 3 o'clock in the morning, this isn't too late.
Hello,
Um,
Sister Mayana. Sister Mayana. Sister Mayana, let's get in. Let's get in it. Let's get in it. Sister Mayana has that 3 o'clock in the morning on her mind.
I
I
do.
was I was snoozing at 3 o'clock in the morning. If everybody knows me, I
But
was
that's my
snoozing.
point, sis. I mean, if it's really if it's really about having a conversation with us, is it a conversation that you have at 3 o'clock in the morning on a Shabbat date when you know you're not going to have the sisters available to have a conversation with you? We had a conversation with him, and so I feel like this was not, or it's clear to me that this is not reciprocal. The courtesy wasn't reciprocated, and this is not what I'm accustomed to from the little brothers. So we're gonna go ahead and go into some of the things that were on his mind, weighing heavy on his mind at, that's right, 3 o'clock in the morning.
All right. All right, y'all. We're gonna give Sister Brian some time to breathe that out. It's all love. It's all love. What I did see, and it's a little baby that's up past her time. Lay down, mama.
I'm not upset. It's the truth. If it sounds weird, it's because it's weird for it to be 3 o'clock in the morning. So I'm not making that weird. It's weird.
All right, we're gonna give her that. We're gonna validate your feelings, Sister Mayana. I'm gonna validate your feeling and give you that for the sake of the people and for the sake of time. We're gonna go into some of the things that I think were presented or represented that weren't necessarily accurate to the retelling. Now, I know when the brother was invited, he said he was at work and that he was listening in, and that at some points he had to put down the phone and not hear the fullness of the conversation. For this reason, when he initially came on the line, he asked me to summarize what was being said. Now, for those who joined us from the beginning, I put all the links in the box. Why? So that there's full transparency and we can understand what the true concern is about. Now, as you can see, I have plenty of things to do. Sister Mina has plenty of things to do. So to actually stop and address what we see as a possible concern and then do it more than one or more than twice, you must know that, okay, why are they still talking about it? Because at this point, people might be like, well, why are they still talking about it? Why is this even a thing? The beginning hour and 30 something minutes after my computer wouldn't let me be great because I had a little presentation for you guys. I narrated the presentation. Reason being, the first initial interaction with the brother was about what was the best example to say that this is something that could be done. And the best example that was given was Jacob. And so the beginning part of the discussion, or not the discussion, the presentation, was looking at the context in which Jacob offered offerings, specifically libation, drink offering, and to see whether or not it applied to us. Now that is on record for you to go and listen to. And I adjure everybody who's listening, who's not sure how we got to the end part. And I see that Brother Akwete joined us, and Brother Akwete actually also came in on the end part. So I'm glad that you're here now so that you can chime in. And if you want, Brother Akwete, we can send you the link so that you can have your voice be heard, because I still got some questions. So just hit me up, Brother Akwete, if you want to join in. We're not gonna, we're not gonna do that. So you can, it's nice. It's not 3 o'clock. It's kind of 10 o'clock, but for me, it feels like 3 o'clock, right? And so what I'm going to say is that when I heard the live stream, I wasn't upset. And some of mine can tell you, I wasn't really upset when I was listening. What more I was trying to understand how a conversation that occurred later, which was this thought of the Northern Kingdom being our objection to libation practice in today's time, how that was being forwarded as the objection, when in reality that wasn't what the conversation was centered around. The Northern Kingdom was introduced, and it's all on record, so you can definitely check it out. The Northern Kingdom was introduced by a Brother Divine Prospect, and Sister Mayana responded. So I'm going to give Sister Mayana an opportunity for those who didn't hear yesterday's conversation. That's also in the link box. And we're just doing this for clarity, because what can happen in our community, communication wise and clarity wise, is that somebody may have a difference of opinion and a difference of views. One person says what they have to say, the other person says what they have to say. The story begins to morph. It turns into something else. Like, and then I told them such and such, and then we're like, well, when did that happen? You see what I'm saying? And then from there you feel tension in the room, right? And so if we don't air this stuff out and be honest about what happened or what we didn't have an answer for, or the direction in the conversation, then relationships begin to break down. So we smile in each other's face, be like, hey, how you doing? And really be like, man, get out of here, because you didn't agree me. I'm not saying this happening in this situation, but for preventative measures, we're going to try to be as transparent as we can. So Sister Mayana, would you like to touch on what you heard? Because you were there. You actually, when the computer wouldn't let me be great, you actually jumped in the whole seat and got us to the point where I actually began the presentation. So if you would like to share your thoughts also and what you've heard in the conversation, and whether or not you think is an accurate depiction of what actually happened. The mic is yours.
I would say that particular episode, right, because you were working on getting the presentation up, I took the liberty of opening up the the phone lines early so we can get some feedback from the people. And so in the beginning, we were just kind of engaging the callers and getting their feedback from what their perceptions were regarding this thought of reestablishing or reintroducing or reviving libations as part of our modern day interactions and adding it back into the culture. Did they think it was a good idea? What I want to take an opportunity to clarify right this second is the title of the show was not whether or not this was something that ever happened. We weren't questioning the reality of this being a historical truth or historical advent of the people and pre-exilic or any other period of time. Instead, we were asking whether or not this was a ritual that needed to be revived, whether or not all rituals were righteous was the exact title of the show. And then we wanted to explore whether or not we had the permission to revive it, whether or not there was this was going to be an effective or purposeful or necessary exercise for us as people who are in the midst of the return. And so that's what we did while you were trying to get the presentation up.
Thank you for that clarity, because that's also important. There's a difference, and this is also a teaching moment for us all. There's a difference in what we hear and what someone has said, right? And so oftentimes when you're in certain positions, you tend to repeat the title a lot because we get a little piece of what we want to talk about, and then we detour, and then we stand there like, what conversation are you having? And so as Sister Mina said, the question wasn't that whether or not did it happen. The question is, should we be doing it in this space and time, right? Or which was righteous. Specifically, we're talking about libations. Why are we harping on libations? Are we being dogmatic? That was one of the opinions that was forwarded. Not, are we being dogmatic? Are we being what's the word here, Sister Mayana? Are we afraid of culture, pre-exilic culture that existed? Are we intellectually looking at the information that's presented, or are we taking an emotional stance? For those who've been following, feel free to share your thoughts in the comment box. Are we being emotional? Did we present enough information to make you go home, or or however you want to go? What are your thoughts concerning this particular topic, and has anything changed because an opposing view has been forwarded? So feel free to let your thoughts be known in the comments box. You are here with us on Peer Review for You. This is a segment, I know it sounds very familiar to Debate Talk for You, but we're peer reviewing. What often happens is information comes out, we study. Every person to a degree leans on their own understanding. We lean on the information that we have, and then in some spaces we come out with doctrines. And if you're in a real close community, if you come out with a doctrine, the doctrine can't be contested. And in other space, you come out with a doctrine, and then you might hear that the individual is a hater, a dissenter, spying out my liberties. You might hear all these things about just simply saying, that's very interesting. Let's take a look at it together. Sister Mina, has that been your experience, or am I just bugging out?
No, it's been the general experience. You're as usual on point with your observation on that.
Is there something, I know you manning the we're doing well, Kyle. Welcome to the conversation. Brother Kyle joined us for the second conversation where we followed up on the libation situation. Is there something else you wanted to raise, Sister Mina? Because I wanted to have an opportunity to read some feedback we're actually getting from those that are on the continent. Just in case somebody wasn't on the Facebook page and they didn't see or they didn't hear that portion, would you like to read it, or would you like for me to read it?
I'm going to respond to what I see happening in the chat while you do that.
Now, I believe, did you put Sister Only Loves on the front page? I wanted to read something because sometimes, and Brother Quetta, he's on, so he can attest. The question that he asked at the end is this a westernized thought? Are we rejecting libations because we're looking at it through a Western lens? The other thing that was on the table is the questioning of the validity of the practices of the Northern Kingdom and whether or not we should be following them, because the Torah lets us know very early on that the Northern Kingdom deviated from Torah. So even though the Northern Kingdom may have been doing this for a very long time, the question is, were they correct in doing so? And these are valid things. These are things that are within the Torah. And in response to that, we have Brother Prospect saying that the Northern Kingdom, it was, I don't even want to misquote. I don't want to misquote. Let me see if I have it here in my little handy dandy book section. That is that the Northern Kingdom, here we go, at the 14-minute mark and 10 seconds, the Northern Kingdom, it was written by scribes who were obliged to listen to the Southern tribes. So in response to the Northern Kingdom getting a bad rap, he said to us, or he put forward this position that it could be slanted because the Northern Kingdom's books for their personally attesting to their own story is not there. And then I also heard that in the feedback, and I thought that that was an interesting point, given that the Southern Kingdom is also spoken of in a similar kingdom. So I'm going to read a little bit from the continent, so it's not these two sisters in their fill-ins switching lanes without indicators and talking bad about, you know, what could possibly be something that could help the nation forward their agenda, possibly, right? And so we have Brother Cletus, who I believe is Sister Mina. Where is Brother Cletus coming from? Nigeria?
Nigeria,
I believe. My computer wants to act slow now. Okay. So we have, oh, give me 1 minute, everybody. And we have Cletus, who says, greetings. This is very interesting to me in regards to the fact that I noticed African American family has been, they put the hidden custom on TV, which is why I use them for reference, pouring libations for the fallen ghetto dwellers. So I thought ghetto dwellers was an interesting term, but I'm like, ghetto dwellers. But yes, so he's referring to, you know, pouring out a little liquor for the homies. He says, do you know the history of this in the African American community? The questions keep ringing in my ear. Surely it is a tradition that we have retained from Africa, quote unquote. He says, I heard another voice. Do you know the difference between what African Americans do and what is done in African libation ceremonies? Question mark. I could have asked this question if I were there. He's talking about on this conversation that we were having. He's in another time zone. He's actually in Nigeria, so he didn't have an opportunity to chime in. He says, it is almost always done with alcohol by African Americans. Do you know more about the history of pouring libations? He's asking for those that he's seen represented in the media, right? This is what I'm supposing. As I came home to my elders, I quickly went to them, telling them what I heard about libation, meaning on the Debate Talk For You show. The answer was, we should be careful not to worship idols. So his concerns was what he was hearing. He looked at the imagery that he was seeing. He went and spoke to his elders. According to his report, the first thing he says, the elders say is, we should be careful not to worship idols. Why would they make that connection? This is an important matter, he goes on to say, as many of us do not realize that when you pour libation, you are awakening the ancestors, spirits, and you are making communication. The question is, to who? I'll see that again, because I'm going to read that also in a report that's called, an article that's called a synopsis of libation. And it's very similar to what he's saying here. It says the question is to who? The libation is only the first part of the process. After awakening the ancestors, we have to actually do something. This is something, a work, a ritual. Libation is not complete without a bare minimum thanking the ancestors or requesting something like support, stability, clarity, spiritual cleansing, or protection, etc. What are we doing as the Most High command? I believe he wanted to say doing. Is it still a command to us? In my community, we still practice it. Many questions to my elders, I will come back. So he's saying that they have questions. He has questions about the practices that are still going on in the community, and he's going to beseech the elders of the community to further discuss this. Very, very interesting stuff. As it relates to the concerns that were on the show and in other spaces about what we are re-implementing, we cannot necessarily use, and it was said that we cannot always go by what our foreparents did for a very, very long time. Because there's a reality is that we could have been doing the wrong thing for a long time, and the result is we are still in the lands of our exile. So that must tell us that somewhere along the lines, something is not right in the pipeline. Sister Mayana, your thoughts? I see you busy on the tippy tappies and what you do. What are your thoughts?
I think that wait, how I get yeah. I want to make sure I'm not doing that. Yeah, there's a thing I can do about the feedback. What you're saying so far is illustrating that one of the concerns that we're coming into contact with is that we are responding to this being an African thought, and that maybe adversely responding to it because so much of the revival is seated in the fact that this is coming from a West African perspective, perhaps, or that the ritual was preserved in those spaces, and that we are operating under the unfortunately pretty common um, view of a lot of awakened Israel here in the States that have an aversion or still may have some resentment toward the continent. And so one of the first instincts or one of the first concerns or impulses is to brush us, give us the same brush and say, well, maybe this criticism is coming from a fear of the continent or a fear of something that is different, and the rush to call everything a Western mindset. And I heard Brother Kweti have a similar concern, maybe not necessarily at us, but maybe the question was for also the listening audience who may also have some of these concerns. And so I think that the fact that we have people on our timeline, in our personal circles, and in our communication with that are tied to the continent, that are on the continent, and to be able to demonstrate that we are pulling from all of these resources as well. So it's not that we're living in a bubble, that we are, as was implied, coming from a space of dogma, coming from a space of not being willing to factor in the fact that Israel has never lived in a bubble, has always shared culture areas with other spaces, and that in fact we are scattered to the four corners of the earth, and that things are being preserved and taken with them into those areas as well. And I think that's a very important point to make, so that we can move past, or we can advance the conversation away from the concern that we're not looking at it in this holistic way, and that we're really looking at it in terms of, is this something we need to revive? We're not denying the reality that it happened. We're asking whether or not this is something that is useful for our return to the Creator. And I think we need to examine what our objectives are. And we may not be able to do that in this particular session. And we've already committed to having more than one sessions to really look at some of the things that were implied in Ron's video. But this one is really just to kind of set the record, or to give the proper record on what our intentions were for having those two conversations. And then later we'll look at some of the new information or new evidence that the brother presents in his latest conversation, and address our concerns about those, or the parts that we agree with. I'll end on the idea. I want to definitely make sure that the idea is not that we disagree with everything that the brother has said, but we have come with some concerns about the connections he's making regarding this specific portion of the culture.
Right. Right. For those who've just joined us, we're talking about laymen, libations. This is peer review episode number 1, where we're going to be taking a look at, we're on break, so you must be like, this is a board. Absolutely not. But we're going to be taking a look at some doctrines, some information, some innovative ways, and that was one of the terms that I heard. That was one of the words, innovative ways in which old customs are reinstituted so that the culture looks similar to that which our foreparents did. It's always important for us to remember where we are. Why is it important for us to remember where we are? There's something that somebody did, or somebody's did, or continues to do, that causes us to be in the state that we are. This is our reality. For us to deny that and say, it's like you go to mechanic, the car is broken, the car is not on. What were you doing before the car got here? Everything is under the microscope. I said that on the show, and I'll say that now. Why is this the case? Because for us to pretend like, if we're just going to go into the time capsule and begin digging out stuff and saying, yeah, oh yeah, this looks nice, let's go ahead and brush this off and start doing this, without saying, okay, what are the spiritual implications of doing this? Okay, here are the benefits of doing this. What could possibly go wrong? What if I'm wrong? You know what I'm saying? What if I'm incorrect about this? What are the dangers? What doors can I be opening? And we heard Cletus say, and actually, if you begin to read about libations and you understand certain things about the spiritual realm, there's many people who have said it's not the beginning. It's just the beginning. When we're giving offerings, when we're giving certain things, and if it's not done in the proper way in which the Creator says, by the way in which he chose, where he chose, and how he chose, it's for reasons. There's the scripture, and I don't want to misquote it, so let me get it, where the Most High spoke about sacrificing to demons, because he went and told Moshe to tell the children of Israel, don't sacrifice anywhere you please. Right? One would say that's because they're worshiping idols. Is it? Is there something else going on in the spiritual realm that our sacrifices and our offerings need to be governed in a certain capacity? Are there other entities outside of the realm of light that we need to be aware of, that we may be innocently or naively thinking we're doing one thing, but inadvertently doing another? This is very important because the Torah doesn't go deep into the spiritual realm, and a lot of people like to dibble and dabble in different spaces. A lot of the people are not really prepared for what may come about if, in fact, they are doing something other than what they think they're doing. Sister Mayana, am I making sense, or does that sound like a bunch of Jim Jam to you?
No, it makes sense. But the people are going to say that we always tend to agree with one another, so it's probably better to ask the people.
I disagree, Sister Mayana, disagree. and no, what you guys don't know is that there are points where Sister Mayana, and I don't agree, Sister Ferguson.
That is true.
But respectfully.
That's true. Right. and just to give you some more kind of insight, when Amona and I are green rooming an idea and we disagree, if we can't come to an accord, it doesn't make it to the air. If we can't make it make sense to one another, then we don't come out and try to confuse the people with it. So that's another kind of piece of our methodology and our accountability, not just to each other, but to you.
And that's what I wanted to say as well as about accountability. If we want to talk about think tanks, we want to talk about spaces where we can bring minds together and discuss, then we have to be willing to be honest, even in our disagreement, right? But if it's going to be perceived as, okay, they're not agreeing with me, so they must have a kind of way of feeling about me, that's not necessarily true. In the spaces that we have been in, on Debate Talk for You in different spaces, there's some people you just have to be like, you know what, I don't agree, and here is why. And we work very hard on researching the why so that it comes across with understanding to the people who are listening. Not just like, I don't agree because, you know what I'm saying, your ponytail ain't long enough. Like, these are not the things that you're really going to get. So hopefully your understanding. Is there anything else that you wanted to bring out in regards to anything that was brought up about the Northern Kingdom, anything that was brought up about your position that you wanted to clarify, because again, we're not going to stay very, very long. We just wanted to bring to you some information about libations, and what they are in other cultures. I brought this up on Debate Talk for you. Sorry, Mayan, I just asked you if you had a question and just kept talking, right? I brought it up on Debate Talk for you that other spaces, other cultures across the globe practice libation in one form or another. And it almost always has something to do with dedicating something to their deity. You see? And so if you're going to send a message, if you're going to send a mail to, say you're sending mail to the creator, you're sending prayer, but it's not at the right address, you didn't address it correctly, how are we to assume that it's going to get there? And so if we're saying this is a form of prayer, Brother Equeti shared with us that in his language, libation is a form of prayer, right? It's a communication. And if the communication is not in the way in which the creator prescribed it to be, how can we assume that this communication is what he actually wants? When we have left on record that when someone, namely a king in this position, wanted to communicate and offer fire to the creator, wanted to burn incense, the creator calls it strange fire, and he gets slapped with leprosy in his head and sent out never to return again. Why? Because he wasn't the right person to be doing that specific duty, and so he got rejected. So how are we in today's time going to see what's left on record and say, yeah, that's what happened to them, but I'm going to go ahead and try and see if it works for me? Especially when we want answers for prayers. I'm not saying not to pray, but if we're saying that we're giving something that we weren't said to give, and if we do give it, it has to be given in a certain way, and we say we're going to give it in the way we want to, is that presumptuousness? Sister Mayana?
Well, I think that what we're hearing now is the concerns that we had for, again, not that this was not something that happened, but that it was highly regulated, and that it was highly regulated not because the Most High was just trying to make a difference between the nations, but because there was a preparation and a responsibility that would come with engaging spirits in this way, or engaging him in this way, or the potential to summon ancestors or the like in this way. And so it wasn't just to say, oh, I want to make the priest special and make the rest of my people not special, but it was to put into place safeguards. You are literally calling out or calling upon yourself some, or opening doors and opening portals. And if you're not capable of dealing with what comes through, then what then? And I think that what we were trying to do, or I know what we were trying to do, was to make the brother aware of the consequences. It was very interesting to hear him say that his purpose, at least in earlier last night's discussion, what we heard the brother say is that rituals was another way of affirming or expressing an identity or an ethnic marker. But then he goes on to say it's not something he's asking everyone to do. If it was something that he could authentically believe, or that we could authentically accept as something that is just solely on this very surface level, only an ethnic marker or way to prove or express an identity, then why not let everybody do it? It implies for me that the brother does understand and saying, you know what, everyone should not do this thing. I'm not telling everyone to do it, to distance himself from the idea that if everyone was doing it, that's not his intention. There's something that lets him know that maybe this is not the best idea for everyone, that there are other things that are on the back end of this thing. Otherwise, there'd be no harm for everyone to do it, and no reason to make a disclaimer that he's not saying that everyone should. Why wouldn't all of us want to have access to an ethnic marker? That would be something all of us should be striving for, especially when we keep coming under fire for not being able to, or the naysayers, as he called it, are always saying, well, can you prove that you're Israel? What are your ethnic markers? And so he's saying this is one of them. Again, I believe that his caution and the necessity of giving a disclaimer shows that on some level he understands our concern that there's this need for accountability on the back end of this. And that's really what all these conversations were about. It was never that we were trying to cause a difference between the Southern and Northern Kingdom. That's not a difference that we made. We never said, well, the North is off and the South is the best to ever do it. We didn't do that. But the North was brought up, and the North was upheld as they are the ones that preserve this thing, and we're doing it because the North did it. The record bears out that the North doesn't have the best reputation in terms of preserving what the Most High had in store, and that observation was put on us, or put on me, or maybe me, for saying what the record said. I didn't say that. I don't have a problem. I don't have a bias against the North, but what I said was the record states. And I think that I don't know if I'm gonna, because I was a little distracted dealing with the people and talking to the people in the audience. But Amuna, did you bring out that we see that the prophets, because there's an idea that the Levites were partial to the Southern Kingdom, and that the Northern Kingdom didn't get a fair deal. In fact, I like that Brother Kyle has joined us, because in our conversation 2 weeks ago, I cleared that up with him in our discussion thread, because I brought the brother into the conversation, and I'll read part of what I said to him, because the brother asks me very directly, why is it the case? He put the Assyrians were taking all over the land, and when it happened, we had to find ways to justify what happened. So in 2 Kings 17 and 18, this is a justification because they broke Torah. But peep where it says Judah also did. So why weren't they taken? So there was this idea of, why are we bringing attention to what the North did when the South was also going through something? And there's no argument on our side that the South did it perfectly. We never did. We're not making those kinds of distinctions. But because the brother brought it up in conversation, my response was this way. I may have mentioned this before, but I'm a social scientist and an anthropologist, to be exact. So don't worry. He was concerned that he was going to offend me by going into scholarship instead of dealing with religion. And I think that's another point. I want to take a moment aside to say, we're not theologians. We're not this concern about dogma. I want to put that to rest. Go ahead and allay all your concerns. We are not dogmatic, and we're not dealing with what did the brother want to call that? Second Temple Judaism, or whatever else he was trying to imply. We were dealing with the facts, and we dealt with the concerns as they were brought up. So I made that statement to him in my response. Brother Kyle is in the chat, so he can confirm that this is what went on between us. I'm not saying anything without him present. I go on to say, although I won't disagree that the records that we have are from the Southern Kingdom, that were preserved by the Southern Kingdom, although the writers are not all from the Southern Kingdom, but we do have Southern Kingdom writers, which is logically consistent since they retain their freedom longer. This does not immediately point to a bias. The North and the South have a precedence of receiving different judgments. For example, cross-reference Isaiah 1 through 4 and Hosea 1 through 4. The Northern Kingdom also goes immediately into idolatry according to their own records, because the Hosea is a Northern prophet. Go into idolatry after being given the opportunity to recover from unrest wrought while under the reign of the United Kingdom. The whole reason the North goes somewhere else, or goes into the kingdom splits, is because they say they have no portion with Dawid, and they move to a whole different space so that they can, according to them, or according to the objective, is to reestablish righteousness that has eroded under the descendants of Dawid through all these different practices. And so the Northern Kingdom goes into idolatry after the unrest wrought while under the reign of the United Kingdom. You will note that Israel, and I put here 1 Kings 12 through 16. You will note that Israel is designated as the older of the two sisters, which is interesting since they split and they're technically younger. And you see this in Ezekiel, and I put here Ezekiel 23:4. This is 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks before last night's conversation, I'm already acknowledging that there's a difference here. The Northern Kingdom is given an opportunity to create something new, that they're considered the older sister. I go on to say, the Northern Kingdom holds the majority of the Israelite branches, and consequently, it is not so far-fetched that she would bear the judgment first and swiftly. She is held up as an example to Judah, which Judah fails to learn from. And then I cite Jeremiah 3 and 6. So there's an admission here that was never taken or never denied, that the Southern Kingdom also fails miserably, and that there is a judgment that falls on Judah. Why? Because Judah saw what the elder sister did. So when the brother Divine goes on to make much ado of the fact that Ezekiel, who is a prophet, clearly speaking against Judah, which is something he says they didn't do because they were all obligated to put Judah in the best light possible. But here we see Ezekiel doing exactly not that, and saying Judah messed up. Judah messed up even worse than Israel. Why did Judah mess up worse? Because Israel had already done it. And Judah, so we've talked about this, Amuna, the difference between, I think the language we use was high-handed sin and unintentional sin. It becomes high-handed, it becomes intentional when you know the consequences, when you see the Most High already pass judgment and you do it anyway. So of course Ezekiel is going to say, Judah, no, like for real, Judah, you definitely are worse than Israel, because there was no precedence for her, but there's a precedence for you, and you did it anyway. And you had all these other things working in your favor, and you did it anyway. So when we look at Ezekiel and we see it, even Jeremiah is also a southern prophet, and we see how he deals with the people. The Most High tells Jeremiah, don't even pray for them. Don't even pray for these people. So the idea that the prophets are giving some kind of leniency, or that the prophets are are being more biased towards Judah, I'm not certain that we can really make those kinds of assertions. And we should really consider what the conversation was about. And it wasn't about pitting the North against the South, and it certainly wasn't about being uncomfortable with the continent or disconnected from West Africa or the traditions they may have preserved, but rather whether or not, I think, and I believe this is the language that we use. I'm grateful that Dwayne is in the conversation. Shout out to Dwayne, who said that he saw the original conversations. We said we're being very concerned with the extra credit, things like libations and the like, and avoiding doing our homework. And we have real homework. Instead of saying, it's culture, it's culture, it's culture, let's all preserve culture, the Most High said, listen, obey me. Our first and foremost, we're talking about our duties to someone or something outside of us, some outside power, some higher power. Yes, Ecclesiastes says, listen, the whole duty of man is to fear the Most High and to keep his commandments. That's all you're supposed to be doing. That's your homework. Everything else is extra credit. So whether or not we can come to an agreement about rituals, whether they be libation, casting lots, or anything else, we first have to agree that we have homework to do. We're not even in a position to do extra credit. We have to get our homework right, and that's what we've been emphasizing for all of these conversations. So no, we're not making culture the priority. Our people had culture and still went right into exile. Culture's not saving anybody. Most High is asking for our obedience. If we're not demonstrating obedience, we don't have the right to start talking about let's revive and restore culture. We're not in a place to do that. We don't have that kind of authority. We're just simply not there.
Yeah, I see Mayana went Brooklyn because it's late. She says supposed to. Mayana, you was like, what we supposed to do? I was like, hey, is that late? She done slipped on the stuff and started. Okay, y'all, thank you for those who just joined us. I'm the comedic relief. That was my sofa. Going in for a minute, we are going to talk about culture. I know we said we wasn't going to stay late, but the baby's asleep, y'all. I got a minute. Then I got to get my nap on. But we are going to talk about culture and the different views. One of the things the brother said, I agree with, because I have said this in many spaces, that we're all here for different reasons. We assume that we come to the same space for the same reason, but there are different draws, there's different bait, there's different hooks that brought us here. And so one thing that will have people like, I ain't worried about that. Someone else may be up in their emotions and feelings about, because it's whatever we've settled our mind on. You see what I'm saying? And we don't know necessarily one another's trigger. So you may think you're just having a conversation. And because this is something that all of my identity is built on, or all of my understanding is built in, or you just touched my little Lego block here, then you get a response and you're like, whoa, what did I say? You know what I'm saying? What's going on here? So we have to keep that in mind and be willing to be transparent that, listen, some of us are Jimmy rigging our identity. You see what I'm saying? I like this and I don't like that. And I don't like green peanuts. You shouldn't be eating, green M&Ms anyway. Got food coloring, but that's another story. And we're like, ooh, I want to make my own little custom Subway sandwich here. And I'm going to call it Torah. And it's going to fit me because I need it to fit me. Right? And this is how we're approaching it, which is causing our delay in a return. But this Sister Mayana brought up the prophets. As I was revisiting, because I'm not even blowing smoke. The Torah is so expansive. The Tanakh is so expansive. Even the New Testament, when some of the conversations come up and you got to go back and be like, wow, I haven't seen this. Wow, I haven't seen this in a minute. You know what I'm saying? And then you're seeing it with fresh new eyes. So this is like an honest, real, way in which things work. So today I was going back over some of the assertions, some of what was being said, looking for things to be explicitly said. And I had happened across Hosea 9. It's just a man that just spoke about Hosea. So I'm going to read it for the sake of this being a biblical discussion. Okay. So the Hosea 9. This is Hosea in the time of Uzziah. I don't even want to tell no lies on him. So he's earlier on in the succession of the kings. So he's in the time of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. Okay, and those are the kings of Judah. So, and Jeroboam is the king of Israel at this time, son of Joash. Okay, so chapter 9. Rejoice, praise be to the Most High. Rejoice not, O Israel, for joy, as other people, for you have gone a whoring from thy power. You have loved a reward upon every corn floor. The floor and the winepress shall not feed them, and the new wine shall fall in her, or fail in her. Slika. They shall not dwell in the Most High's land, but Ephraim shall return to Mitzrayim, or Egypt, and they shall eat unclean things in Assyria. Just like stick a pin in these little places here. Most High's like, you're going back to exile, and you're going to be eating unclean things in those places. They shall not, meaning the house of Israel, offer wine offerings. I'm at verse 4. As a matter of fact, can I show you my screen? I don't want to mess nothing up. They shall not offer wine offerings to the Most High. It says the Lord. Neither shall they be pleasing unto him. Their sacrifices shall be unto them as the bread of mourners. All that eat thereof shall be polluted for their bread, for their soul shall not come into the house of the Most High. Remember, there's already a split in the kingdom. There's already the covenantal house of David and Israel selecting kings, making kings of their own volition. Okay. It says, what will you do in the solemn day and in the day of the feast of the Most High? For lo, they are gone because of destruction. Egypt shall gather them up. Memphis shall bury them. The pleasant places for their silver, nettles shall possess them. Thorns shall be in their tabernacle. So the Most High is like, yo, I'm getting ready to kick you out. This is the northern tribes. This is not shade. This is not speaking grimy. This is what the text is saying. So when we say something, this is the direction it's coming from. Why I went here specifically is because specifically in this instance, some might argue it's not all across the board, sis, but in this instance, I found it very interesting that the Creator is saying through the mouth of his prophet that they shall not offer wine offerings to the Most High, neither shall they be pleasing unto him. Their sacrifice shall be as down to the bread of mourners. And in another verse, in another chapter, it speaks about the mirth is going to cease, your feasts are going to cease. Because remember, when the kingdom split, the northern kingdom, the first kingdom, the northern kingdom was like, I don't want them to go down there to Jerusalem for these 3 times in a year, because next thing you know, he's going to steal my people and they ain't going to come back. So they made their own feasts. They made their own merriment. They made their own things. They made their own spiritual centers. They made their own priests of the people who weren't priests. So there's a lot of history that's going on by the time we get to this point where the text is saying you're not even going to be able to offer these things because you're not going to be here to do so, and they're not going to be pleasing. Feel free to read the rest of the text, but I wanted to bring that forward because I thought that was a very important point to look at as it relates to when we were in exile, when we were not at home, when we were being spoken about being sent out of the land, that the next thing the Creator is saying, we're buffering. The next thing the Creator is saying that your things that you're going to be giving me is not acceptable. Your offerings that you're going to be offering me with your defiled bread and your defiled food amongst the lands of your exile, they are not going to be acceptable. And this is something that we should consider. And I said it on the show that offerings have a lot to do with the blessings. When you're offering something to the Creator, this is reaffirming the blessing that he gave to Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, that I'm going to take your descendants to a land flowing with milk and honey, and I'm going to bless you. And then we turn around with the blessing that we've been given and bless our power. If that's making any sense to anyone. So when we talk about what we should be giving, there is a whole equation of what we should be giving to the Creator when we're in the lands of our exile. Because we first have to come to terms with why we're here. We can't just jump out of detention and be like, aha, I'm here, and now you're going to accept what I'm giving you. The Most High says, again, and everybody knows the text, when you bethink yourself in the land of your captivity, when you humble yourself and pray, when you bethink yourself, when you recall, when you bring to mind all of the transgressions of your foreparents, when you accept the consequences of your iniquity. This is something we have to accept because we're still in the mode of, how do we get out of it? How do we get around it? You know what I'm saying? I don't like this feeling, not realizing that we're still contributing universally with our energy, our thoughts, our actions to what is holding us bondage. Once again, this is the spirituality of the Torah that we are disconnected from. And as long as we don't grasp that, we don't really understand that, then we're going to be looking for little manifestations here and there to say, well, maybe it's this, well, maybe it's that, well, maybe I can get an answer like this. We do see Saul went to the degree where he wanted an answer, and he was able to skirt the Torah to get the answer. But then when he got the answer, he didn't like the answer that he got, right? And so there's many spaces where the Creator even says, would they be inquired of me? I believe it's in the book of Ezekiel. Would they be inquired of me, son of man? Like with all of that, when we think we don't have abominations in our heart, in our minds, we think we don't have these things, but are we sure? Because when our foreparents came in a presumptuous matter, he said, tell them I would not be inquired of them because we've yet to do these things. And I believe we said that on the show. Sister Mayana, what are your thoughts?
Can I be heard?
Yeah, go ahead. I'm putting my mic on mute.
Regarding these things, what's important for me, and I agree with you, of course, completely, that we have to be mindful of those things that we are obligated to do before worrying about those things that may be of interest to us to reenact or to restore. And that's why going into these things and looking into them as to whether or not they are suitable for our contemporary conditions and having honest, respectful dialogue is important. You know, we forget that our wisdom says that everyone, the first in his cause is righteous until his neighbor seeks him out. And that neighbor who seeks you out is not doing it maliciously. We're supposed to be accountable one to the other. When we make assertions like there is a bias in the text, when we make assertions that undermine the prophets, when we make assertions that that there could potentially be some type of malice behind asking questions, giving an assessment, looking at or questioning the objectivity of the person that disagrees with you. I think we put ourselves in a rather precarious position, because then we're not teachable anymore. We're not in a space where we're communicating with one another anymore, and that becomes very dangerous, because we become what we see in Judges, in this area where everyone is doing what's righteous in their own eyes. And so we're being responsible when we look at these things, when we question these things, when we examine them from all angles, when we go to not just Ezekiel, even though Ezekiel is a great place to go, because Ezekiel says both the judgment of Judah and is honest about what's going on in Israel. Jeremiah is doing that. Amos is doing that. We have a list of other prophets that are trying to preserve for us what we need to know. And so I think that we don't want to start to limit these conversations, because we're afraid that we're going to lose the respect of the community. The community, in my experience, in the 20 some odd years that I have been in the culture, studying the culture as an Israelite, and in the last decade or so that I have been personally interfacing with the community, what I have found is that the community sticks by you when you are teachable, when they know they can hold you accountable. You won't lose them if you're found to make mistakes. It's when you're saying, I can't be asked anything, that I am the think tank. And I think that's something that we all have to avoid doing. We always invite people to have a conversation with us. We always want to explore these things together. And the point that you're making now, and the point that I made earlier, that we need to concentrate on that which we have been prescribed to do first. Even if you want to later say it, and I don't think that many of us will, but even if we wanted to later say that we want to reintroduce any of these other pre-exilic or pre-Edenic or pre-anything else traditions back into the return, we won't be in the position to do that until we have put down the foundation. You can't build, or we can't introduce these things when we haven't created a solid foundation. And what we're discussing now is the importance of foundational things. And we're looking at the continent, and the continent is saying, you know what, we're in exile. I mean, Akweti is here also. I'm sure Akweti will agree. We're not in our ancestral lands there either. We're not in the place that we're supposed to be. All of us are still in exile. We must not have done what we're supposed to do yet either in any of these spaces. So we should be working together to do the thing that gets us back to where the Most High wants us, to get us back into the space of obedience. And I think that that's being lost in a lot of these conversations. I want to briefly, just while I still have the mic, say this. At the top of the conversation, I brought up that the conversation that the brother Ron had this morning took place at 3 a.m. My purpose for saying that is that, yes, I think it's an absurd hour to have a conversation, but more than that, it's an hour and it's a time that didn't allow for us to have a conversation, for it to be a conversation with him. We didn't, and so for me, it was more the point that a conversation was being had about us and not with us. And we work very hard to create an environment where we're approachable, where you can say, it says, I'm still kind of not okay, or I haven't fully reconciled those previous conversations. Can you come on my show and talk to me about what was said. Because now that I've thought about it, there's some other things that I didn't get a chance to say to you when we were on the air. Come through, let's have a conversation. For us, that's family. That's more important than whether or not I can pour libation underneath any green leafy tree. If I can't sit down at a table with my brother and have a conversation, who cares if I can pour libation or cast lots? That's not when I go into the Decalogue and I look at the 10 Commandments, none of them are checking whether or not I can cast lots or have libations. 6 of them are asking me, how do I relate with my brother? So for me, the violation wasn't 3 a.m. because I was asleep at 3 a.m. And when I got the notification, when I got the call that this went down, the person that told me would testify, and Mona will testify. I'm like, this didn't bother me at all. I'm like, look, the brother had something to say. I watched it with no feelings about it at all. I didn't, I kind of, what is it, like around 28-minute or 38-minute mark where we were told to stay in our lane. Okay, that got a little chuckle out of me, but the rest of it didn't bother me either. What I am saying now is that, or in the beginning of the conversation, was it's important for us to be a people. And at 3 a.m. on a Shabbat day, there was no room for us to have a conversation, and I was disappointed by that. And then I wanted us to be able to be very clear that none of these concerns have anything to do with the continent. It has nothing to do with the fact that there are similarities in West Africa to this thing, and that we're trying to say, oh, well, because Africa is doing it, that's what makes it bad. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. We have real concerns about whether or not this is biblically sanctioned versus it being historically situated. And so that's one of the things that I felt, or that I'm currently feeling, is important to be fully established in these conversations, that we're looking for those things that are going to be part of the return. Actually, Brother Dwayne saying, in fairness, my sister Ron made it clear that he wasn't responding to you or Sister Amuna personally, but rather the certain ideas regarding the culture and the rituals of old. I hear you. Yes, he did make that disclaimer. However, he twice mentioned my name and Amuna's name specifically. So after saying, I'm not talking about Mayana and Amuna, but then say Mayana and Amuna, it's very obviously a disclaimer. And then to quote us. So, I mean, it's very hard to say that he's not addressing us and then say our names and quote our statements and then repeat something that was a direct charge, such as the Northern Kingdom. No one else was responding to his response about it being the Northern Kingdom. I did that. And I think maybe Amuna did it a little bit afterwards. So let's be honest about what these conversations are about. Our names were mentioned. He's responding to what we said. And that's fine. That's fine. I don't live in a glass box where you can't respond to what I said. But like and his closer associates will tell you, just invite me to the conversation. I'll come through. I have no problem explaining what I said, and not only that, but if you're going to say something that I said, don't misrepresent what I said. And so, I mean, so to be fair, if there's going to be quotes and these different allusions, then it's only right that we be at least invited to the conversation or made aware of the conversation. It shouldn't be something that I'm hearing about in the morning, 2 and 3 hours after it has already transpired, and making secondary conversations necessary. And that's what I'm saying there. So, but I appreciate you reminding me that the brother did say that it wasn't only to us, and that he was also addressing others that may share concerns about his discussions about the rituals of libation and even casting lots. So, Brother Dwayne, thank you very much for adding that thought. I appreciate that.
All right. Those were Sister Mayana, y'all. For those who just joined us, We're having a little discussion about lanes, laymen, and libation on this peer review episode of our peers here in the community. We are brothers and sisters here in the community.
We have a response from Ron.
Yeah, I saw he said allegations sound like an album. And he'll be looking for the feedback. That was it right there.
Yeah. I just.
So definitely, why are we stressing this? And then I want to read a little thing. And if anybody has any questions or comments, feel free to share. I love to say that because how we share is how we learn and how we grow.
Okay.
I'm Amuna. That's Mayana. Because sometimes the name sounds kind of similar. And so since we're usually on the radio, they'll be like, "What's that, Amuna?" This is Amuna. And we're speaking is Sister Mayana. In this social, I sit back and watch a lot of what goes on and how controversy escalates in this realm of social media. It's because to a certain degree, we violate certain universal laws and principles that then cause, as I said earlier, contention, breakdown in relationships and communication. If we're going to say something in a public space, if we're in a private space and we're saying something and then somebody takes what you said in a private space and brought it to the public, that's one thing. If you put it in a public space, then the expectation is that the people of whom you're speaking are going to eventually hear what it is that you're saying. And as Sister Mayana says, if their position is presented incorrectly, they're going to want to speak on their own behalf. And so then you have this type of back and forth conversation because the individuals of whom you're speaking of was not given the opportunity to speak for themselves. And so how in this public space, I find over many years, because I've done the debate talk for you, I've done reggae shows, I've done quite a few hosting spaces, is invite the person. If you want to have a dialogue, a discussion, if you're looking for understanding, how you, and it doesn't always work because somebody might be discontented and just go around and just flying their YouTube and just having videos all around the place. But then this creates this very contentious atmosphere. And so inviting the person to discuss with you in real time kind of helps with that situation. And so for those out there who may be having social media issues, we definitely don't want to turn this particular concern into a level of back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But again, whoever is the person in which the question is about is always welcome to the table. A lot of times they don't show up. That has also been the experience, but let it never be said that, listen, I'm going to have this discussion. It's about something that you said. It's about something that you wrote. It's about something that you presented. And we would like you to join. I have had something that I've said on Debate Talk for you. I get a phone call. Such want to talk to you. What's good? What they want to talk about? Oh, they want to talk about something you said, such. Okay, let me get the time marker. Let me go back, take a look at it. Boom. You go do it because we're not infallible. When you're speaking, that's why the scripture says with a multitude of words are, or actually Solomon, the wisdom saying, what does it say? With a multitude of words are, what happens?
Then it's not far behind.
It ain't far. Why? Because when you chat too much, eventually you're going to talk something enough to talk. That was the patois version of when you talk too much, eventually you're going to say something off. Right? And so Shlomo and all his wisdom that he got from the Most High, before he went into other things, and I want to give you the scripture for that before they say, did they just make that proverb up? In the multitude of words, hold on. Sin is not lacking. This is the KJV, Proverbs 10 and 19. When words are many, sin is unavoidable. Proverbs 10 and 19. So that was the wisdom saying that for anybody who knows, I love Proverbs. So that will hear Proverbs from me a lot. Anywho, as it relates to doing our homework and stop trying to go for the extra credit, I wanted to go to Isaiah chapter 58. This is something that oftentimes we hear on the YouTube universe of why people should be yelling and screaming on the top of their lungs and cursing everybody out. But as we continue down, we will hear the prophet Isaiah, who's speaking, and the Most High speaking through the prophet Isaiah of why extra credit is not necessary when you need to do your homework. Hallelujah. At 58 and 1, cry aloud, spare not, lift up thy voice like a trumpet. and show my people their transgressions, and the house of Yaakov their sins. Yet they seek me daily, yet they seek me daily, yet they seek me daily, and delight to know my ways, as a nation that did righteousness, and forsook not the ordinance of their power. They ask of me ordinances of justice. They take delight in approaching to the Creator. This has always been a cultural issue. We like to run up into the Most High face. It's late, y'all. So if y'all hear me like chipping out of patwa, I'll try to stay on point here. We like to run up in the Creator's face. We like to find out, how can we beseech you? How can we come in your face? How can we ask you questions? In this particular case, it's saying, wherefore have you fasted, say they, and thou seest not. Most High, you don't see me doing all this stuff? You don't see me sacrificing? You don't see me doing this and that? You know, what am I doing it for? Not. It says, wherefore have we afflicted our soul? We went a whole day and we ain't eat nothing. And thou takest no knowledge. Why you going front like you don't see us, Most High? Behold, in the day of your fast, this is the answer, you find pleasure. That also goes for our brothers and sisters who's running around, like the Shabbat says, don't take delight in your own pleasure, and we run around doing our own pleasure, asking wild and ridiculous questions about what we could and could not do on the Shabbat. So this is 10 Commandments stuff right here. We have questions as whether or not we should have the entirety of the 24-hour Shabbat, or whether Shabbat should only be in the daytime, or we don't have the nuts and bolts of what it is that we're supposed to be doing. So on this particular fasting day, the Most High says, which will be Yom Kippur, you find pleasure and you exact all your labors. Behold, you fast for strife and debate, and to smite with the fist of wickedness. You shall not fast as you do this day, to make your voice to be heard on high. The Most High says that's not acceptable. You claim you're doing what I asked you to do, but you're really not doing what I asked you to do. It says, is it such a fast I have chosen, a day for a man to afflict his soul? Question. Is it to bow down his head as a bulrush and to spread sackcloth and ashes under him? Question. Will you call this a fast and an acceptable day of the Most High? Question. Is not, this is again, he's telling you what is required. Is not this the fast that I have chosen, to loose the bands of wickedness, to undo the heavy burdens, and to let the oppressed go free, and that you break every yoke? Is it not to deal thy bread to the hungry, and that you bring the poor that are cast out of your house? When you see the naked, that you cover him, and that you hide not yourself from your own flesh. It goes on to say, and many of us know, then shall thy light break forth as the morning, and thy health shall spring forth speedily, and thy righteousness shall go before thee. The glory of the Most High shall be your reward. Then, verse 9, then shall you call, and the Most High shall answer. You shall cry, and he shall say, here I am, or Ami Po, right? If thou take away from the midst of thee the yoke, the putting forth of the finger, the speaking of vanity, and if you draw out your soul to hungry, to satisfy the afflicted soul that is amongst us, that are crying, and they that ride, that thy light rise in obscurity, then shall your light rise in obscurity, and thy darkness be as the noonday. And the Most High shall guide thee continually, and satisfy thy soul in drought, make fat thy bones, and you shall be like a watered garden, and like a spring of water whose water fails not. 12. Yes, I'm reading it all. Not that long. And they shall be of thee, and they that shall be of thee shall build the old waste places. They shall rise up the foundations of many generations. This is when certain foundations is going to be risen of the old generations, after we've already did the assignment. And you shall be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of paths to dwell in. 13. If you turn away your foot from the Shabbat, if thou turn away thy foot from the Shabbat, from doing the pleasure on my holy day, I just said that earlier, right? And call the Shabbat a delight, the holy of the Most High, honorable, and shall honor him, not doing thine own ways, nor finding thine own pleasure, nor speaking thine own words. Because sometimes people say, where does it say that at? 14, thou then shall you delight thyself in the Most High. I will cause thee to ride upon the high places of the earth, and feed thee with the heritage of Yaakov thy father, for the mouth of the Most High has spoken it. Usually we just hear the opening of that verse, lift up your voice like a trumpet, and then forget all of the other things that we are called to do. There's many. It goes on, but I wanted to read that because this is a similar situation that we find ourselves in. We want to pray. Praying is good, but not if we're praying redundantly. Not if we're asking for stuff that if we did what we were supposed to be doing, then it's natural, it's automatic. You see what I'm saying? And that's a lot of things that we don't understand, that things we put things on automatic when we get in alignment with the Creator. And at which point we stop like, Most High, I need this, I need that. At which point we're up on some, thank you, Most High, for this, thank you, Most High, for that. Because now the Most High is opening the doors and we just saying thank you. Told our Most High for safety, told our Most High for this. But if we're still in the want mode, in the lack mode, something within our environment, something within our lives, we need to assess. I would bust out into song right now, but it's late. Because there's a song, I don't know if you guys heard the song for this, about loose the bands of wickedness. Does anybody know that song? As y'all know, I just like sometimes just bust out into song. Sister Maya, you know that song?
Nope.
You don't know that song?
I don't think so. Sing it for me.
It go, loose the bands of wickedness, break every yoke, relieve the heavy burden, and let the oppressed go free. It's an old time. Loose the bands of wickedness, break every yoke, relieve the heavy burden, and let the oppressed go free. We need to let the oppressed go free. Loose the bands of wickedness. We're bringing new doctrines. We're bringing new information. We're oppressing people with our hurt. We're oppressing people with our pain. We're lying on the Creator, putting our studs instead of the Most High, making the people stumble over stumbling blocks and snuffing out their spirit. And yet, this is not talking now. I'm taking a minute, Brother Divine. So take a minute. I'm not like, oh yeah, this is all Brother Divine Prospect. This is not what I'm saying. I'm talking about if you back up to the landscape and look at all that what's going on. Right now, we have a situation coming out of Dimona in Israel. And my prayers and heart goes out to the brothers and sisters, the young children who at that time were young children in the situations, and now they're old and they're opening their mouths and speaking. Now, people may have their political views. People may have their thought processes of what went down and what shouldn't have went down. But the reality is, right now, we have a group of people who are hurting, who are in pain, who there has been a cycle of hurt and pain, and it has been shrouded, right? It has been covered over, and now is the time that truth is rising. We're talking about sexual abuse. We're talking about physical abuse. We're talking about mental abuse. We're talking about spiritual abuse, and it's not just Dimona. So when we want to talk about the things that we are accountable for, we need to look around in our environment and make sure that we're not the problem. Because otherwise, else we're running up in the Most High's face without brushing our teeth in the morning. Meaning we're not presentable to even begin to have the conversation because we're not doing the things that we should be doing. And in a lot of cases, we're the perpetrators. In a lot of cases, we're in spaces suppressing women, children, and other men if we're in positions of power, and then we're going to turn around and make prayers and beseech the Most High. About what? Because some of the behavior we can change. Some of the behavior we're responsible for. I'm sorry, because now I'm going to get turned up.
I mean, I want to ask that we're getting caught up in the performance of being the people. We're getting caught up in what the presentation of being the people. You bring up Dimona. Dimona had the land and had the culture. Right. And didn't do what they were supposed to do. So it's not just reviving the culture, it's reviving the fear. It's going back into obedience. The Most High said, obey me. And so we have to not just want to reclaim the accoutrements, the outside appearances, these other kinds of activities that we're calling the extra credit, because that's not getting us the grade. It's not getting us what we need. And one of the other things that was brought up in the conversation that Brother Divine had this morning was he brought up that he asked us about Passover and then kind of paused. And in I guess his chat people who listened received, I don't know how he intended the message, but they received this as we didn't have an answer for it. And that in the way, in some of the phrasing that we started to, because of our dedication or intent to disagree about libations, that on the spot we started to backpedal on things like the Passover over Pesach. But for those of you who saw the conversation, if you haven't, the description link is in, it's in the box. The link is in the description box, and you can go back and listen. We reminded the brother that we understand that the Pesach is not being carried out correctly. And that wasn't a conversation that we had because of the June discussion. It's a conversation we had back in March. We brought it up in March and said, listen, and shined a light on the fact that we're not appropriately doing Pesach, that this is not happening. And this was something that we brought up and we gave to the people. And that was way before we decided to talk about libation. So there is, and I actually thanked him for bringing it up, saying that it helped to illustrate our consistency in questioning how we carry out some of these ritualistic practices. The Passover is supposed to remind us of the time that we were liberated from Egypt, and that's what it's for. And so there are prescriptions on how to keep it. And there are things that we cannot do. So what we have around Pesach is not Pesach. We're doing memorials or other things, but we need to be honest about the fact that we're not doing what we're supposed to do. And we ask the people to be accountable in our March conversation regarding Pesach. So I'm bringing that up to do two things. One, to show that we're not banging on the brother Ron in any way. That this is not something that we, kind of say, oh, Ron is doing something, let's complain because it's Ron. We look at everything, right? And we look at what the people are doing in the trenches. We try to answer the question that the people are asking. We're trying to help with the homework portion of what we're doing. Like, we need to be honest about where we are and what we can do and what our limits are, so that we don't come and stand with hubris in front of the Most High, as Amuna was illustrating, with unwashed hair, unwashed and unbrushed teeth, and consider ourselves presentable before the Most High when we haven't done those things. Because just because we had put on the frilly negligee and we think they were cute before the Most High, we haven't done the basic hygiene of cleaning up and being presentable. And those are the things that we are speaking about. We're speaking about accountability. We're speaking about proving that we have our obedience down. And I get it. And I want to say, I get it. I get it that we want to do the other things. I get it. Every day, the everyday doing, it's not as eventful. It doesn't really feel like we're doing something because all of these outward showings are not happening. This, I think Amuna has said several times during our talks when we're on the air, that when the conversations turn away from what stimulates and what's exciting, and we look at the soul work that has to be done, those things that bring out personal accountability, those things that are on the inside, it's uncomfortable and we don't want to do it. It's not the same. There's no one to celebrate me when I'm doing my inside work. It's not the same as when I do the things that others can see, or that I can do with others, or these other. But we have to remember that relationship with the Creator is important. The first 4 commandments are about our relationship with Him, and we can't just say we like the other 6. We want to do things with each other. Those things are important, but they're not the only things. I don't want to, we can't be the bad guys every time we point that out, right? So,
for those who just joined us, we're winding down here at the 12 o'clock hour. We wanted to talk about lanes, laymen, libation. We were reviewing again the review. We're reviewing the review.
Thank you for joining us here on Peer Review for You.
The first episode of again, we're on Debate Talk for You break, and so Under the Palm has been here. A lot of the episodes from Under the Palm, Debate Talk for You, the Relationship Challenge are numbered, trying to be numbered on this side because it's mixed in over at Debate Talk for You, and so it's there if you search through. And so I've been working on trying to, takes a little time to move them over so that you can see all of them and have conversations such as this, because believe it or not, when wild, crazy doctrinal things rise up, there's a lot of people out there like, I wonder what they're going to say, or, who's going to talk about this one. And I mean, I'm not too sure, but I'm not stepping out there. It's kind of like that. And then you'll see people tagging, yo, Muna, check this out. Or Sister Miranda, what are your thoughts? Because now I guess we've been the people who are willing to say, hey, it's not easy to stand up. It may look easy, and then be prepared for whatever comes your way, because you're saying, you know what, I don't really agree with this. But if you stand with the Most High, you know that there's no malice or ill intent in your heart. Then, oh yeah, by the way, I have on a C3 shirt. If y'all want to support, go ahead and do the C3 challenge. Some of us might be full of it. And so the C3 challenge will help us to flush those things out, because y'all just seen the top of my t-shirt. So that's why I said that. But yeah, so there are a lot of things that are causing stumbling blocks. And this, as someone who's always on the lookout, as well as working through my own personal soul growth and elevation, to sit idly by, it says, if you see, do not put a stumbling block before the blind, right? And I'm gonna give you that. I'm not the chapter and verse person, meaning I can remember what it says, and then I have to go look up the chapter and verse. So here you go. Hold on. There. Do not put a stumbling block before the blind. And that is Leviticus 19:14, right? Thou dost not revile the deaf, and before the blind you should not put a stumbling block. You have been afraid of the Most High your power. I am the Most High. And that's Leviticus 19:14. I'm not the Most High. It says that. So it's talking about not cursing the deaf. Those who are in our society will be considered handicapped. And somebody would say, Amuna, that's the physical deaf and dumb. But then we hear spiritual deaf and dumb, right? Spiritual blind, the blind leading the blind, and the both fall in the pit. We understand that this is talking about physically. We have people within our community who you want to aid and not cause to arm themselves because they cannot see and they cannot hear as of yet. And so when we see things as, again, that potentially can spiritually open up spaces that it may not look like something is happening, back to the topic of libations. Libations, and Brother Akwete said, I don't know if he's still with us because he said he was on the road, but Brother Akwete said a little bit earlier in the conversation, and I didn't want to miss it because I saw when he said it. He said, true, it's very dangerous when it's not done right. Brother Akwete, if you're there and you're still hearing, feel free to expound upon it's very dangerous if it's not done right. What are the dangers of doing libations not done right? These are the questions that could ask. If we're going to come and say, hey, you can take cinnamon, hey, you can take rosemary, you can take eucalyptus, and you always have a warning on it. That's called responsibility. You have to be responsible to the community, to the consumer, for what you're producing, and be saying not to be drinking by pregnant women, not to be such and such, such and such, such and such. This is the warning label. Yes, it's good for this, but it also can cause that. That's responsible. But if I come and say to you, you know what, guys, you should take this, and not telling you what can happen, for instance, with the colon cleanse, you can take a colon cleanse, but if you are severely constipated, the type of colon cleanse that oftentimes I share with people, the advice is not to take the colon cleanse if you're severely constipated, because if there's not a clear channel, you can hurt yourself. That's just in the physical. So when we're talking about what are the spiritual implications of knocking on the door with a libation, if we're at the wrong door, If you're knocking on a door and you're at the wrong door, what if something opens it? And we're thinking, oh man, we're knocking on the Most High's door. But what if in reality, the Most High's like, you can't knock on my door like that because I don't accept it there, so I don't know whose door you're knocking on. Then what? You see what I'm saying? And then where do we go from here? Because it's not the first, second, or the third time that I've heard of spiritual happenings within the nation, and then people not having real-time solutions for what to do with these spiritual happenings. Because you begin to ask the question, well, what did you do? Where did you go? What were you touching? All of these things you have to begin to ask to find out what's really going on with the people. Sister Mine, is that you I'm hearing?
No, I agree with you. I said right.
That's right.
That's right. I'm tired. That's right.
So yeah, it's 12 o'clock. You know what I'm saying? We're going to go ahead and wind down. I believe we touched on all the points of just, clarifying the position that no, it wasn't dogmatic. And he says allegations. That's why I put it in quotations. We weren't being dogmatic. We were not being emotional, although you didn't say emotional. For those who out there may like those sisters are emotional. We weren't being emotional. We were objectively looking at the information that was given, looking at what the Torah says, looking at other cultures that practice it, looking at the reasons they practice it. To say that Tupac is talking about pouring out some liquors for my homie, that's a practice for appeasing the dead.
Bone Thugs and Harmony.
Bone Thugs and Harmony. That's a practice. What are they doing? They're pouring it out to the dead. When I read in the presentation that Egyptian book of Ani talks about pouring out libation for your parents, that it says that God would be pleased with you. So there is a practice within other cultures of pouring it on the ground for the dead. Now, I asked Mayana the question earlier. When the priest poured out libations, when it got into the hands and regulated by the priest, was it poured on the floor? Where was it poured? That's a quiz question. Was it poured on the ground? Is it something that's said when you pour it on the ground? Did they pour it on the ground? Or is that for some other nations? Did we do it under different trees or different rooftops or locations? Did we do it in one central location? These are all important.
Right.
If you order something from Amazon, you don't want them to just drop it under any green leafy tree. Like, yeah, man, just pick a tree and drop it over there. I'll get it. You're going to be like, man, you better ring my doorbell and bring me my package. I'm just saying, at that point, it matters. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't get it. You'll be on the phone with customer service. It matters at that point. And so I'm saying that to say, if we ordered that book we've been waiting for, and then they're like, yeah, I dropped it to your neighbor's house down the street because I was kind of tired and I was going to get off of work. So you go ahead and get it from there. So how much care do we have with saying, Most High, where are we supposed to deliver this? Because we can stay in constant prayer.
Okay.
And the Most High answers prayers. You see what I'm saying? Go ahead, sister.
We don't have the gynecologists doing our brain surgeries just because, they all went to med school. We just don't pick whoever to do whatever task. Everybody has their own purposes. And so just to say that, we did certain things and it's overlapping in certain spaces, that the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker can do these things. We want to be accountable. We want to be responsible because yes, there is a disclaimer that I'm not telling everyone to do it. Okay, I'm not telling everybody to make the Molotov cocktail, but let me show you how to make the explosive anyway. And I'm not telling you to do it, but this is how you do it. How do you then deal with the uninitiated who you gave the how-to, and they went out and did it? You have to just really kind of consider it's YouTube. And you're telling people what this is, and there's somebody somewhere doing it. And, I don't know that the Most High is going to accept, well, I didn't tell them to do it. We have to think past the moment. And I understand knowledge is exciting. You get it. You want to share it with people. But we have to there's the backlash. And we have to be, and Moon and I are always very, very cognizant of the people might not be ready for this or may not know what to do with this. One of the sisters, welcome to the conversation, Sister Malaka. The newly awakened Hebrew is typically chasing cultural markers. I think that's a very important point. That when we have newly awakened people, they're looking for something to attach to. And instead of us introducing them to the law or introducing them to obedience and introducing them to accountability and responsibility, the welcome package is polygyny. The welcome package is, this is what's going to make you feel good. This is what makes it, this is what's rewarding for you. This is how you, and this libation thing. And honestly, some of the things about libation and other rituals that might be attractive is this idea of instant gratification. I do this thing. I can see that I've done this physical thing and I get a reward from it. Right. And so that's one of the things that the newly, like St. Malaka's agreeing with me. It's those things. And when we say things like, well, obedience is important, that's so abstract. It's so abstract. It's not immediately rewarding. It's like, of course, obeying the Most High. I guess, but it's not. It's personal. It's soul work. It's hard. It's lonely. It's those things. It's not. I have flatbread and I can do it in the park, and people can see me praising my Creator, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to be understood as a chosen people of Israel. There's nothing wrong with that, but that can't be what we privilege. We can't privilege all of the creative parts of it, or these things that we can do over the Creator, right? The sister says Torah becomes almost secondary. That's very dangerous when the Torah part is secondary and the culture becomes primary. The culture cannot become the deity. It cannot be the it. It's supposed to be the consequence of our obedience. I think Amun and I talked about that too. That culture should be, if we're being righteous, should be the consequence of obedience.
Give us an example, Sister Mariana.
I'm sorry?
And do you have an example of that, for that statement, to substantiate that claim?
Well, what example did it's midnight, I'm drying up.
Yeah.
For instance, we becomes a ritual for us, or it becomes habitual for us, is
right. And I think we have to come back and have the discussion about what is culture. I think
we definitely need to do that.
We have to come back, and I think we'll come back and have that conversation. What is culture? What is tradition? How is it formed? Are we talking about that which man creates, or are we talking about that which we subscribe to, what the Creator has given us? If we subscribe to Torah, then the representation of Torah in our life becomes culture, right? Because it's the
we could give circumcision as one of our cultural markers, and that's something that's actually shared cross culture. Other cultures have circumcision too, but the way that circumcision becomes cultural for us is that it's attached to a command, and it's attached to a particular reasoning. And so the thing about culture, and the thing about cultural markers and features of culture, is the meaning that that particular nation or people group attach to it. We assign meaning to particular acts, and that's what becomes the culture of the people. You'll find that many cultures share particular markers. What makes them distinct is the meaning that the people group assign to those acts, action, signs, symbols, and semiotics. That's the difference. And what we're saying is that for us, the command becomes the culture. I want you to institute circumcision, because circumcision represents a covenant between you and I. You see, the reasoning is the command. The command then becomes the culture because it's part of this other reasoning. And so that's an example that I would give of command becoming the culture. And that way, culture is not the object. Culture itself is a consequence of what? Of obedience. Obedience comes first.
Correct. Culture is not the dictate. It doesn't, like, culture, and then culture, it works the other way around.
Right.
Culture comes from that which is coming from the people. This is why culture changes.
Right.
If the thought process from the people, the mentality from the people changes, the speech of the people changes, the manifestation of the actions of the people change, the culture changes. American culture changed from the 1900s to present.
Correct.
American culture changes from the 1800s to the 1900s. And every time something else happens within the society, then you're going to begin to see the culture change, because it's based on different things that are happening. That's why I said, I think that would be an awesome conversation to have, because there's some thought processes concerning culture that I may not necessarily agree with, for reasons, some of which we stated here today. We are in charge of, because now it became culturally acceptable in Sodom and Gomorrah to do what they were doing. It was a culture. You see what I'm saying? Of Sodom and Gomorrah to begin to do these wicked things. Okay? And so when Israel's culture began to change towards accepting, if some would say it already had a lot of the foreign nations around it, because we came with Egyptian thought processes, right? And it was easy to assimilate other the nations that were in the land. And this is why to be honest, the Most High says that you always had the idol on your mind. Mm-hmm. Go to the book of Ezekiel, the 20th chapter, the Most High is reading Israel right. Like, yo, as a matter of fact, you never really worship. You never really loved me. You see what I'm saying? The Most High is like, you always was on that stuff. And I can't, but the Most High said it's only because his word that he swore an oath that he brought you out, lest you would have been destroyed in the wilderness, because you tested the Creator continually. And so my question to the people, and I'll leave it here, if it's okay with Sister Miranda, we could come back. And again, if you would like to be on this side of peer review for you, feel free to let us know. This is not a one-man, a two-man show. But
I want to give them the way to contact. You can always email us at underthepalm2@gmail.com if you want to share with us your desire to be on a talk with us, or if you want to give us feedback about any of the talks that you have already heard, either here or on Debate Talk for You. Always feel free to reach out to us. We're very friendly sisters, and we welcome your feedback. Before I turn the mic back over to you, I do want to thank the sisters and the brothers that have joined us, Brother Akweti, Talk Truth, Renee and Zachariah, Anonymous Hebrew, Dwayne Yosef. I see here that you also had Kyle. Again, Kyle, thank you very much for coming through. We appreciate you. We had Dwayne was very active in the conversation. Thank you so much for that, brother. Your feedback has been tremendous, and we appreciate you. I see that Malaka joined us a little later on in the conversation. Did Akweti return? Yeah, Akweti returned to the conversation. Do you want to read Akweti's response?
Yeah, I'll read it. Hold on. Sorry about that, y'all. I'm like, what date is it? I'm looking at the date and like, yo, is somebody busting firecrackers? It's not that time yet, is it? That's why I was like, yo, hold on, wait a minute. Okay. Before Akwete, it was Malaka. Sister Malaka said the desire to separate from Western thought and culture can become what drives our Hebraic walk, as opposed to relationship with the Most High. I would have to agree with that statement. And Brother Akwete says libation is poured by a herbalist, a fetish priest, a Torah priest. These all don't pour the drink offerings to the same deity. One has to know how to distinguish the differences. Help us to know, Brother Akwete. We are looking for some answers. Give us some information if you can. If you're willing to come back, we look forward to that too. And see, Malaka said the same thing. Share. What are the differences? I have a little bit of my thoughts, but I would like to hear yours. What are the differences, and what are the dangers that can happen when you pour libations at the wrong space, at the wrong time, to the wrong
as an uninitiated person,
or as an uninitiated person, that as well. And so now that I forgot my closing thought. Oh, I know what my closing thought is. If we go back throughout all of the Torah situations that became issues, whether it be in the garden, whether it be Cain and Abel, whether it goes down through the lines of all of the things and the issues, the question that I have asked myself throughout time, that I've been studying and seeking to understand the Creator and myself, is that what is that? Right? Because whatever it is, it's somewhere in you, whether it's activated or not activated, right? Some of us, we have different elements of these stories within us, and some things are activated. Some people are more activated within the jealousy space. And so this is what Cain is dealing with. You see what I'm saying? Some people are more activated in the curiosity space that are going beyond boundaries that were set for us. This is what Kawhi was dealing with. So when we just read the stories as their words on a page and don't see ourselves within the narrative, then we will never understand how we can make those very same mistakes, even when we have an open book test. And right now we have an open book test. We're able to go through, instead of justifying or demonizing, we don't have to do either, what the position that Yaakov was put in, we can begin to understand without necessarily changing the text and making up conjecture to say Yaakov was put in this situation, but this was the result of the situation. Because the reality is human issues and problems have not changed really from the beginning of time. All of these internal dialogues, all of these internal struggle that they had, we still have. And if we don't learn ourselves to begin to work on ourselves, that's that work that when you start talking about it, everybody get quiet. Yeah, I've been meaning to. You know what I'm saying? These are the things that when we say, why can't we work together? These are the things that make sure we don't move forward. Because the minute that someone else is going to be able to begin to move forward in what it is they have, that's when we're going to get envious. That's when we're going to backbite. That's when we're going to get jealous. That's when we're going to look to tear down one another. Those are the things that we have been struggling from time immemorial up until this moment. So yes, we may be asking the Mosai, let me get this new job real quick. Yeah, Mosai, how about this? You know what I mean? But these things, people, opportunities are all people, things, and environments are all opportunities to bring out what's inside of us. And that, in my estimation, is what we have missed this entire time. And so we get caught up in, yeah, we're going to argue if Jacob really wanted Leah. We get caught up in all of these things so that we never have to really look at ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So this is why we have 50 million argument videos on YouTube, because I get to talk about someone else. I get to project on someone else. I get to not look in the mirror. That's not going to get it, because people talking about return, and I don't really hear a lot of people talking about return, and that's another strange thing. We'll come back to that. We're not really even talking about, like, with a really burning desire for true return in righteousness, because it starts here in timeout. When you say, you know what, I see what I did wrong. You know what, help me to work on this. Social media is, you would think there was 12-year-olds on social media every day, and these are grown adults. I'm just going to leave it right there. May the Most High be with us all as we continue on this journey. Hopefully this brought some clarity. Sorry for those who came that thought we was going to be busting shots, blah, 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 blah. That didn't happen. It's a true concern. It's a genuine concern. It's a desire to not be responsible for sitting by idly if something is concerning to you. One of my favorite, and I'll leave with this, and I'll see if Sister Mina has a last thought for tonight, is in the book of Ezekiel. As a matter of fact, when the Most High takes Ezekiel and he's like, son of man, and he shows them all that the abomination is done. And then he says, put a mark on them, and all of them that sigh and cry for the unrighteousness that's done in her. That means if we're seeing things that are out of turn, if we're seeing things that stir our spirit, and we hold our peace and we don't speak out against it, that mark that the Most High was telling Ezekiel, we don't get, because there's no outward manifestation that even though it's going left, I'm gonna stay right. You see what I'm saying? There's no outward manifestation like, yo, I'm really concerned about this right now. At least I tried. At least I spoke in respect. You see what I'm saying? So this is one of the driving, myself personally, this is one of my driving motivations, that it may be unpopular, but at least I say I asked the question so that we can have the conversation. I remember a teacher told me one time, you know, you ask a lot of provocative questions. I'm like, provocative? That's, you know, but it's thought provoking to make sure, you know what, we're thinking. We don't want blind leading the blind. Sister Mina, any last thoughts before we wrap it up? Wow, y'all had me to the 12:30. Ooh.
Yeah, we put in 2 hours. We were not intending to do that.
Not at all.
No, but no, I wanted just to thank everybody for coming through and participating in the conversation. I want to thank the brother Divine for commenting in under the link and letting us know that he received that invitation and that he'll be visiting our thoughts later on. and I look forward to hearing his responses to this and his reaction. Prayerfully, he understands that not just this conversation, but the ones that preceded it was not coming from a place of malice, but of affection, not just for him, but for the people, and protection, not just for him, but the people. I think that together we admit that we can see that we're all jealous on behalf of the Most High, that we want to be pleasing to him, and we want to be responsible to one another, and that prayerfully that gets clarified in this conversation and understood by everyone, that that's what this is about. And our future conversation will also be about clarity and edification. That's what we do every time we turn on our camera, every time we turn on our mic, every time we open up the scriptures. That's always where the heart is for this. So, I want to thank Akwesi for coming through. I want to give my thanks to This Is Only Love, who is also on the constant sharing with us the information that she is gleaning from Nigeria and Ghana and her studies and her stays there, and helping us to flesh out and give the best information possible that we can from contemporary sources, as well as our studies of the antiquity. So with that, I would Lila Tov.
All right, y'all. Lila Tov. Make sure y'all subscribe. UTP Under the Palm. Subscribe here, and we will be going live from here, letting you know if you have any questions or comments. Again, there's so much to talk about, but there's not that much time in the day. So again, if you are studied in an area, if you can shed some light, if you have a perspective that the people can value, then feel free to hit us up. And, as long as there's no bashing, no harassing, no all of that kind of low vibrational, energetic type of stuff, then we'll be good. So with that, everybody have a blessed night, and may the Most High be with us all.
We'll give you the address again. It's Under the Palm, the number 2 at gmail.com. So even if there's maybe, Amuna, I'm about to rope us into maybe a bigger conversation, but if there's something going on in the picture, if there's something going on in the pictures and you want Amuna and I to weigh in on, send your suggestions. Your suggestions.
Man, what you doing, Sister Mayana? You just going out looking for stuff? We got stuff blow this way. If it blows over here.
We got another season coming up. We're on summer break right now, but we got a whole season of Under the Palm and the Relationship Challenge.
Oh my goodness.
So we're about to do peer review for you, episode 2, 3, 4, 5, going all the way into the future. So feel free to drop in your suggestions for our peer review. Amuna's like, cut her mic.
I'm about to cut her mic right now, y'all. Good night. Sister Mariana she volunteering now. Like, fling you in the good night, everybody. Lila Tov.